The biggest news of the day yesterday came at like 5 o'clock, 5:15. I forget the exact time. And it came from a guy named Bob McLean.
Oh, yeah.
Is that his name?
Yes.
Big Bob.
Bob McLean,
Superhero?
who covers the Houston Texans for the Chronicle, which I believe is down in Houston. I'm not 100% sure if that's right, but I'm just trying my best
Sounds
here.
right.
He broke the news that Cal McNair, owner of the Houston Texans, has decided to part ways with Billy OBrien, who was the general manager, the head coach, and the play caller. So whenever they decide to let him go, right there at 5-something, and Adam Schefter tweeted that the Texans have fired head coach and GM Bill OBrien per Maziano and me. That was very interesting because there was a little bit of a battle of who broke the news.
Yeah.
And I do think Bob McLean had it a little bit earlier, but he was dialed into that building. Shefty probably had it too, was just trying to confirm it with his sources. Who knows how it goes, but you get the insider game. Billy OBrien fired after an 0-4 start, which saw him take on the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Vikings. 0-4, he's out. I think his winning percentage with the Texans like 50-something and 40-something. So he's won the division a few times. He's gotten Houston to the playoffs. Last year they made a run in the playoffs, beating the Buffalo Bills and losing to the Chiefs ultimately. It was very interesting because if you're outside of the Houston Texans building, like ours, like we are, it's hard not to be like, well, that guy seems like an idiot. When he traded away DeAndre Hopkins for a 4th-round pick and David Johnson was like, well, that doesn't seem like the right move. Then some rumors started popping out about why Billy OBrien wanted to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins and all that. Then last year they gave up a 20-something point lead against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs in like the day after he named himself general manager. It was like there's just a lot of lack of self-awareness moments that have happened with Billy OBrien over the years. But I don't think if you look at strictly his record, you would have expected a 0-4 start, a GM, a head coach, and a play caller get fired in the middle of the season. So obviously behind closed doors, there's a lot of shit popping off as well. I put out a little feeler to the internet asking Houston Texans fans how they feel about this. And I'll tell you what, not a one negative response. Not a one. The only negative responses came from Colts fans, Titans fans, and Jaguars fans. They're like, hate it, hate it, hate it, because they wanted Billy OBrien to be down there. Now, that doesn't make all the sense in the world because Billy OBrien has won the division a lot as the head coach of the Houston Texans, which used to be the Indianapolis Colts division. I actually was a part of watching that transition process from us dominating every year to potentially the Texans going, then us getting, then the Texans going. It was a very interesting dynamic, but now it turns to Romeo Crennel as the interim head coach. Romeo Crennel, I believe, was a head coach before for the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. He's also been around the NFL for a long, long time. And there were some players, I guess, that reached out to Diana Rossini or some other insiders that said it's just a sense of relief. It's almost not that they didn't like Bill OBrien, but it's like there's a lot of questions on what the future was. Now they have a definitive answer, and now they can move forward knowing that it's not going to be Bill OBrien. But will Romeo Crennel get that head coaching gig? If he does well here for the next, 12 weeks, they do well. That team rallies around him. Is he the head coach of the Houston Texans? Or will they do what the Washington football team did last year, what the Cleveland Browns did last year, which is see a new interim head coach, have a little bit of success, team sense to rally around him. It was Greg Williams, and then it was what's-his-face over in Washington, and then just kick him out the door because we got our own ideas. You got to hire a GM first before you even hire a head coach. I mean, they got a lot of work to do in the middle of the season, but it feels like their fans and their players seem to be pumped about this decision.
You mentioned it. What a kiss of death on his way out, too. Trading the best receiver, losing the first, 2 draft picks that they have, and when they easily could go like 3-13 this year after this.
That organization is in a bad spot. Because if you look from the outside in, obviously, it seems as if he lacks self-awareness, right? Immediately upon losing a game he shouldn't lose, he names himself general manager afterwards. And then he trades away one of the best wide receivers in the football, no matter who you ask, top 3, and gets a 4th-round pick in return and David Johnson and all this shit. He names himself play caller, head coach, GM. Nobody really understood outside of Houston if all this was just like, oh, this guy lacks self-awareness to the 10th degree. His record is a winning record overall, and he has taken the Texans to the playoffs, won the division down there that was previously dominated by the Indianapolis Colts. Is it everything that we think from a self-awareness standpoint and more you think that went through Cal McNair's mind, or what was it exactly?
I think, Bill probably got himself into the most trouble when Brian Gaine, the previous general manager, went out the door. The reasoning behind that move was, and that was supposed to be Bill's guy. I mean, Rick Smith, prior to Brian Gaine, there was a power struggle between Bill OBrien and Rick Smith for years and years. That just went on and on. And when Rick Smith went out the door, it's like, okay, Bill OBrien wins the power struggle. Now Brian Gaines coming back from Buffalo. That's his guy. He's got the table set the way he wants it. Then that doesn't work. And the reasoning was when Brian Gaines went out the door, it was like, hey, look, we're constructed up to a certain point, but we've got to be better. Like we can get to the playoffs now, but we need to take that next step. And it's not happening under Brian. So another power struggle develops between Bill OBrien and his general manager. This guy, Jack Easterby, comes in from the New England Patriots. And I don't really know how to describe Jack Easterby other than like he's like the Wizard of Oz of like morality. And like, that's
the Wizard of Oz of morality.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like not a lot of people understand entirely what Jack Easterby does or what he's about or what he adds to a franchise.
Big thumbs up, guy.
And yet he seems to have power and sway and be behind this curtain controlling some things. Well, here he is now in Houston impacting this process with Bill OBrien. But I think what got Bill in trouble was this idea that you're going to take this next step. And really the steps that were taken was Bill OBrien installs himself as general manager when Nick Caserio doesn't work out. Nick Caserio was never going to work out. It was a flaming wreck when they tried to engage in that process, and Jack Easterby was right in the middle of that. Then after installing himself as head coach, he says, hey, the OC, he's going to have play calling duties. It's just weird. Like he announces it like toward the end of the preseason, and it felt like the first 3 games were a murderer's row, and you're like, is this a setup? Like, is he setting this guy up? And if they get off to a difficult start, is Bill suddenly going to swoop in and go, I'm going to take play calling duties now? It's exactly what happened. And then beyond that, when you started to get into the layers of what was going on, he's being a contract negotiator. Like he was involved in like contract talks with agents on top of being the head coach, on top of being a play caller, on top of being the general manager. He's doing 50 million things and none of them are really working out well, and you get off to a poor start. So I think at that point, Bill kind of put himself at center stage, and there was really no one around him to take the blame at this stage. And I know a lot of people are going to get caught up in Jack Easterby. I know there's a lot of questions about who's this guy, why did he remain, and did he frag Bill in the process? You're getting too into the weeds on it. Like the bottom line was Bill took on way too much. He tried to be Bill Belichick. And I'm telling you, at some point, people in the NFL are going to learn, whether it's coaches, whether it's owners, they're going to figure out that you cannot replicate the Bill Belichick experience. He's the only guy who can be a head coach and a general manager and somehow manage to pull both of those off well. Other people can't do it. And every time it happens, it falls apart like this.
It's so interesting. He's also lead counsel. I didn't know he was also lead counsel. He's lead counsel, general manager, head coach, and play caller. And if your team stinks, I mean, there's nobody else to really blame there, because normally you do set yourself up to blame other people. You hear the coaches say, we'll coach whoever we have or whatever. That's them saying
right.
The general manager didn't put the team together. The general manager can always say, well, we got the talent. They always say, like, we have a talented
right.
roster. That's them saying, well, the coaches can't figure it out. And then you have a head coach, much like what Billy OBrien did to his offense coordinator. It's like, well, our play caller isn't doing the right thing. He put himself in a position leveraging against himself that he had no fingers to point to anybody else. And it felt like he was a big finger pointing guy. And then whenever you find out that you're the guy that all the fingers are pointing to, all the roads lead to you, that is a pretty tough position to be in if you're old Billy OBrien. So what's next? Romeo Crennel is now the interim head coach, a man who's beloved by almost everybody that's ever worked alongside Romeo Crennel. His former head coaching job, I believe, was the Chiefs, the last one or whatever, but now he takes over in Houston. I assume the team will rally behind him a little bit here, and I think maybe they'll have a better performance than they've had in the past. Now you need a GM. Who's going to be the play caller, the original offense coordinator, I guess, who had to go against Murderers Row?
Yeah, Tim Kelly. Yeah, he's going to be the play caller. And so, you know, as you said, I think you'll probably see the schedule gets a little bit easier here. It gets a little softer. The start was really rough. So you could see, I think, some people rally behind Romeo Crennel. But, you know, the names that are going to pop up, you're going to get, you know, look, Matt Eberflus is killing it right now in Indianapolis as the defensive coordinator there. He's going to be in every head coaching conversation next offseason. You know, Eric Bieniemy is another guy, obviously out of Kansas City, that is going to be a name that's going to be out there. What I think is going to be really interesting is the annual Josh McDaniels people inserting him.
So is that because the Jack Easterby thumbs up morale guy is down there and he has a good relationship with Josh McDaniels, everybody assumes? Josh McDaniels was the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts until he turned the plane back around on the same day that the Colts had a press conference announced for him, a introduction to all the corporate sponsors meeting. His whole day was already planned. Plane in the sky. Robert Kraft says, why don't you go ahead and turn that thing right back around, okay? You can coach for us for another 10 years and then just take over here. Unless we give it to Steve Belichick, then you can hop on a plane and go somewhere else. Does McDaniels want to take that Texans job, you think? And why is everybody automatically assuming that? Because of Easterby.
Easterby, because of the Easterby connection, and there's been this insinuation that Josh and Easterby are close to each other. Again, I so little is really known well about Easterby that I question any idea I hear about, he's really close to this guy or that guy supposedly was really close to Bill OBrien. And yet Bill OBrien goes down and Jack Easterby remains. So I would question how much you can believe that's put out there. I will say this about Josh. Every year, his name is pushed out there, even after the debacle in Indianapolis. Which, hey, at least he hired Matt Eberflus before he ended up turning that job upside down. But, Josh's people know that at some point, and I think it's got to happen pretty soon, that Josh needs, he's got to get his next head coaching gig. I think seeing how the franchise may be rejuvenated with Cam Newton there, it's pretty clear. I don't think Bill Belichick's going anywhere. And so the first thing that you do if you're a guy like Josh McDaniels is you go, well, is the quarterback, answered? Is the quarterback situation bad? Is it good? Are you in that velvet rut where you kind of have like a middle-of-the-road quarterback and you're not bad enough to get to the top of a good quarterback draft? No, they have Deshaun Watson. So for all intents and purposes, if he believes in Deshaun Watson, at least that's resolved. They have Laramie Tunsil, who they paid a ton of money to, so you at least have your left tackle, you have your quarterback, but there's still a lot to do with the Texans. I think a lot of what Josh McDaniels' involvement is with a lot of jobs is that he has representation that makes sure he is very well represented in the press, involved in a lot of these jobs. Cleveland was a good example. All I heard was
that's what John Gruden did, by the way. John Gruden, when he was working at ESPN, his name would get floated out for a head coaching gig, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, he'd get a raise for Monday Night Football. It was like, this guy is a genius. And then he finally goes to the Raiders. The thought that Bieniemy isn't the guy is very interesting because, and it's also interesting because you have to sign, if you sign the coach before the GM, then it's the coach pulling the trigger on who the GM is. Then ultimately, if that goes bad, who fires who? So I would assume that you have to look at the GM first if you're Cal McNair. In the GM role, a lot of people are saying, Louis Riddick, get that guy out of the booth into there. Is there any conversation about who the GM would be, or is that something that we would not hear about because it's not as glorified as a position?
Not yet, I don't think. I think instantaneously people start to talk about the coach because the coach is gone and they forget that this is a dual role guy. So now you're speaking out of logic. Logically, every single NFL franchise should hire your GM first and let that person lay down the foundation for the next head coach. And frankly, you need to go get a general manager who is 100% on board with Deshaun Watson being his quarterback for the next 10 years because, as you said, you already gave the guy the bag. He's got the bag. He's got 6 bags. It's trash day every day at his house. He's always got a bag in front of him. So, I mean, you better be prepared for Deshaun Watson to be your guy if you're the GM. And then go out and get the coach who is prepared to have Deshaun Watson run his system, be his guy.